Thank you very much, Tony, and welcome to all the mothers, fathers, stepmothers, stepfathers, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers, brothers, sisters, foster moms, maybe a few boyfriends and girlfriends from back home who've come to visit, and anybody else who's in the audience. It's a pleasure to speak to you all this morning. I've structured this talk mostly as a personal narrative, and the reason I've done that is because I've talked to a lot of students who stress out because they feel like they need to have figured out what they're going to do with their lives by the time they graduate. They're wrong, they don't. I certainly didn't, and I'm doing okay. It's fine to change what you do over time. Most people do. What's most important is that they figure out what they're most passionate about and then use that to drive their choices. I'm hoping that the narrative I'm going to tell you about will help you to see that model in my life and give you some examples of how you might do it in yours. So sitting in the audience, you might be wondering, how did I get here? And I'm going to tell you about that. I grew up in Los Angeles in the San Fernando Valley, and I was not seen as sort of one of the smart kids group at my high school. I was a B and C student. My friends were mostly the sort of stoners who hung out and who weren't in honors classes. We were all really smart. My friends could fix cars. They set up successful web businesses in the very early days of the web. One of them was an Eagle Scout. But almost none of those smarts and skills were valued by the schools that we were in. And this created a frustration and a fascination for me that continues to this day and that has been very central to the research that I do. I want to understand how to make school a place that values the skills that all youth bring. So fortunately, and unlike a lot of my friends, I was a very, very good test taker. And I got into a great university. I started out at UC San Diego in computer science, but quickly became frustrated. I was learning all kinds of interesting technical skills, but what I wanted to understand was how to connect those skills to humanity and to society. And so my faculty advisor helped me to create my own major. I took all of the computer science core, but skipped circuit design and instead took cognitive science, design, linguistics, sociology. And I got active in research. Together with a few other students and our faculty advisor, we created Active Campus. It looks kind of old school now, but it was a tool for helping people to find and comment on interesting things and people around themselves. We do this all the time today. We use Yelp, we leave Google reviews, but Active Campus was the first system like this. We were also the first system to use Wi-Fi signals to help your device to figure out where you're at. And as we worked on this, and I was getting closer and closer to graduation, I had the same conversation with myself that some of your children are probably having right now, which is, what next? Now, I was very fortunate. I had a skill set that gave me lots of choices. For me, the sort of obvious choice was, do I go into industry and work as a programmer? I'd done that. I was the first employee of a startup that got bought by Oracle. It was really fun to build things, but ultimately it was unfulfilling for me. I knew pretty solidly that I didn't want to build the latest advertising widget or make a better save button for Microsoft Word. And I thought about the project that my friends and I had worked on. What was it really all about? Well, it wasn't really about using Wi-Fi to figure out where you are or being able to collaboratively mark up spaces around you. It was really about thinking about how new technologies could bring people together, how they could enable them to express themselves. And that was the thing that excited me the most. How could computer science be a tool for improving people's lives and their learning? And I realized that what I really wanted to learn about next was not how to build more advanced technologies, although that's very fun too, but I wanted to understand how people learn and how design can be a part of improving that. My junior year of college, something really important happened. My little brother Riley was born. This is us just a few weeks ago hanging out in Harvard Square. And thinking about him growing up and going to the same public schools that I went to made me really upset. In many ways, public schooling has gotten worse. This is just one example, but in the early and mid-'80s, there was an explosion of computer science in schools across America. Not keyboarding, but actually learning to use the computer as a tool for expressing yourself, for understanding powerful ideas. Here's a picture of some kids in the early 80s programming with Pappert's Logo Turtle. I was a child of that area. I first learned to program with tools like this starting in first grade. But by the mid-'90s, this approach was nearly all gone from public schools. We've slipped backwards. We have keyboarding and we have presentation making, but we typically have nothing about computer science. And in this and other ways that are largely driven by testing, and in particular, what's easy to test, my little brother is getting a worse education than I got. And that's something I want to change. So after my undergraduate years, I went to Northwestern University in Chicago, and I signed up for the Learning Sciences PhD program. Learning Sciences is a relatively new field. It's about 25 years old, and it's a rethinking of what education research should be. It says that we can't just think about learning as being about acquiring facts or learning rote processes, but that we need to understand learning as a cognitive process, as one that happens in a social and cultural context, and as one that can be shaped through design work that could include making new curricula, designing new learning communities, and creating new learning technologies. My PhD dissertation investigated how new data visualization tools that I created could help a team of teachers to better understand and respond to their students' thinking, their interests, their passions, their curiosities. At the same time, I was part of starting Digital Youth Network, which is one of the nation's most successful new media arts after-school programs. It's now called UMedia, and it's in sites all across the country. After I finished grad school, I was a postdoc at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, and then I came to Tufts. As Tony mentioned, I'm an assistant professor, which basically means I get 6 years to prove myself or I'm out in the streets. And I'm also the McDonald Family Professor of Engineering Education. Now, I'm very lucky because I'm in both the computer science and the education departments. And you may not know this, but this is the first position like this anywhere in the United States. The McDonald family donated generously to Tufts to create this position, and I'm very thankful to them for that. As Tony mentioned, I'm faculty at the Center for Engineering Education, and together with my wife, Sarah, I live on campus in Lewis Hall with 250 Tufts students. It's way better than it sounds. So why come to Tufts? Why come here? Well, there were many reasons. One very strong one was how fantastically smart our undergraduates are. I can't overemphasize how talented our students are. You probably know this already. But another thing that drew me to Tufts was the strong focus we have here on active citizenship. This is a focus that's crystallized in our Tisch College. And the basic idea of active citizenship is that we all work to solve problems around us to build a better society, and that we also work to ensure that all members of our society have an equal voice in that problem solving. And so active citizenship isn't just about helping people, and it isn't just about improving your community. It's about recognizing every person's right to take a role in shaping the world around themselves. And I want to tell you today about how my students and I do those things. I love computer science. And one of the reasons that I love it is that it isn't just a field that helps us to understand the world. It's a tool that enables us to transform it. It's a tool that lets us creatively address needs from art to medicine to public policy. And I think computer science is a tool that everybody should at least learn a little bit about, because it's an important skill set for being an active citizen. A lot of people misunderstand what computer science is about. It isn't just about coding. You've probably seen ads on TV and on the web from groups like code.org who are doing great work, but to some degree, the focus on coding misses the point. Computer science is really about problem solving. It's problem solving by computer. And we do this in all kinds of fields. We solve key problems in understanding the human genome and in developing drugs to treat diseases. We solve problems in graphics and animation that enable artists to be more expressive. We solve problems that help people to stay in touch with each other and find information they want. There's another reason you should care about computer science. You're probably wondering if your sons and daughters are going to get jobs when they graduate. Well, I've got news. Nearly all the STEM jobs that you hear about in the media are actually computing jobs. Here's the US government projections of where the new jobs are going to be over the next decade. You probably can't read the text from the back of the room, but you probably can see the big bars on the blue area and the small bars everywhere else. Those the bars in the blue area are computing jobs. Nearly all the new jobs over the next decade are going to involve computing and computer science. There's another reason to get excited about computer science, which is that it's central to many of our most crucial policy debates right now in our country. As a society, we're deciding whether the internet should offer the same treatment to individuals and startups as it does to large corporations. And that debate's really about whether internet service providers need to treat everybody the same or whether they can prefer some speakers over others. It's about whether the wealthiest interests get to have the loudest voices in this amazingly powerful medium. And at the same time, computer science enables our most intimate technologies. And we haven't yet solved all the problems with them. I'm going to read you something about this. This is by Chris Coyne, who wrote a few weeks ago. We whisper, "I love you," through the cloud. We have pictures of our kids in the bathtub. Our teens are sexting. We fight with our friends. We talk shit about the government. We embarrass ourselves. We watch our babies on cloud cameras. We take pictures of our funny moles. We even ask Google things that we might not ask our doctor. This text is about the many intimate and potentially risky, embarrassing ways that we use network technologies. And at the same time, as we're putting more and more of ourselves out on the internet, as we're putting our most intimate details in greater and greater volume online, we're creating technologies that make it harder for us to protect and delete information that we might not like to have out there. As a society, we haven't yet figured out how to invert this blue line, how to empower people to protect their most intimate data. At the same time, new computing technologies have dramatically reshaped the government's capability to surveil us, to look within our homes and in our private relationships. And we have a legal system where whistleblowers have a very, very hard time coming forward to report abuses and how our privacy is intruded upon. Advances in computing technologies are at the center of these debates, but public debate is lagging behind the technological innovations. Public debate about these issues is often remarkably uninformed. This is a headline from NPR just a few days ago. It's great that we're debating how to balance individuals' right to privacy over what's on their cell phones, their computers, and on cloud services, and that we're trying to figure out how to balance that with the public's interest in police being able to seize data to pursue criminals. But often the people participating the loudest in these debates don't know what they're talking about. This is an editorial from the Washington Post about 3 weeks ago, calling for compromise. They wrote that a police backdoor for all smartphones would be undesirable. A backdoor can and will be exploited by bad guys too. However, with all their wizardry, perhaps Apple and Google could invent a kind of secure golden key that they would retain and use only when a court has approved a search warrant. Unfortunately, this makes no sense, either logically or technologically. A secure golden key is a backdoor. It has the same risk of exploitation, whether by industry or by the government, and regardless of who holds onto it. And what the Snowden leaks have shown us is that we can't trust the government to respect those boundaries. They're hacking into Google, for example. And so both technically and historically, this proposed compromise is a false one. It's also one that's ridiculous to people who work on computer security. People like Adrienne Porter Felt, who works on computer security at Google, is publicly mocking it. She posted a picture online of herself wearing a wizard hat and a fake formula for the secure golden key that the Washington Post envisioned. So our media are talking about these issues in ways that the experts actually think are joke-worthy. One of the reasons for this, and this gets to a broader issue, is that policymakers don't know computer science. I did some digging around online, and I was only able to find one member of Congress who has a background in software. He was just elected in Boulder, Colorado, by the way. If you know of others, please let me know. I don't think there are any. One of the reasons for that is that we don't teach computer science in most schools. Only about 1% of US high schools students take the AP computer science exam. Only about 10% of schools in the United States even offer computer science courses. Another dimension to this is that the schools that do offer that, the people that get to take computer science are often the most privileged. Mostly, it's wealthy students. So this is a map that Tom McClin made of the Atlanta area, shaded by median household income. The bluer the area, the wealthier it is. Then on top of that, you see little yellow pushpins. Each one corresponds to a school where there's AP computer science. And as you can see, it's almost exclusively taught in the wealthiest areas. We're not providing equitable access to computer science across all communities and for all kids. When we drill down further, we find that the situation is even more troubling. In the schools that offer computer science, women are not well included. Let's see what this looks like. Here's some data from my home state of California. On the left, you see the breakdown in K-12 of boys and girls. It's roughly 50-50. But then if you look at who takes AP computer science exams, only roughly 20% are women. This same pattern exists in universities across America. Computer science is now the most popular engineering discipline, but it's also the one that has the lowest percentage of women. Only about 12% of CS undergraduate degrees at major research universities in the United States are awarded to women. We see the same pattern, in fact, a worse one when we look at race. You'll remember this graph I showed you a few seconds ago of the percentage of women taking the AP computer science exam. Let's add race into the mix now. Latinos constitute the majority of the K-12 going population in California, and African Americans constitute about 7%. Meanwhile, only 7% of Latinos take the AP computer science exam, and only 1% of African American students do. Just to give you a sense of the numbers, the total number of African American students who took the AP computer science exam in 2011 is 29. Only 29 students. This same pattern also exists at universities. 15% of United States undergraduates are now African American, according to the Department of Education. But only 3.8% of people who get computer science bachelor's degrees are African American. You might be wondering, how does Tufts fare by comparison? And in some ways, the picture looks pretty good. Nationally, 12% of bachelor's degrees in computer science went to women last year, and at Tufts, it was 22%, nearly double, which is something we can be proud of. At the same time, some of our peer institutions are doing much better. Carnegie Mellon, it's 42%. We have room to grow on race. Enrollment in my computer science department has nearly quadrupled in the last 7 years, but enrollment by African American students in our major has remained flat or declined. We need to do better. It's also pertinent to look at the workplace. So here's data from Google as of January of this year. Only 17% of employees in technical roles are women. Only 2% are Latinos. This is in a state where the majority of young people are Latino. And only 1% are African American. I believe that this is a moral failure of my field. What I've shown you is a civil rights problem. I'm in a field where there's incredible injustice. At every stage of development, from education in K-12 to universities to the workforce, there is systematic bias. We are failing. This isn't just a problem of inclusion. This is also one of engineering better systems, a result of constantly winnowing down who gets to participate in computing. Is that we have technology companies that sometimes make terrible decisions about how their systems will affect marginalized populations. I'd like to tell you about an example of one such design decision that I learned about from Mike Montero. You can find a video of him talking about it online. I recommend that you do. This example was also covered in the Wall Street Journal, and it's the story of two college students, who could be your sons and daughters, who got screwed over by horrible decisions made by programmers at Facebook. One of those students is Bobby Duncan. She was a freshman at UT Austin. She's gay, and her family is very, very conservative. She meticulously configured her Facebook settings to prevent her relatives from knowing a whole lot about her private life. She was closeted to them. She joined the queer chorus at UT Austin and was added to their Facebook group. And then something really awful happened. Without her consent, she was outed to her conservative relatives and their friends. She had to put up with awful harassment like this. I'm not going to read it aloud. You might be wondering, how did this happen? Well, it happened because Facebook decided that the privacy settings of a group that you can be added to without even your permission should trump your own privacy settings. Facebook, in essence, decided that there was nothing that Bobby could do to keep these two very separate parts of her life from collapsing into each other. As Mike Montero points out, this wasn't just some dumb programmer who made a programming mistake. This decision had to be approved through layers of peer review and management, so it's not just a programming bug. It's a failure of ethics and inclusion. discrimination in who learns computer science, and then who gets hired and then respected in the tech industry has led to a homogeneous workforce that can't understand the struggles and needs of different marginalized communities. It's a very good bet that nobody on that development team had ever had to be closeted. They couldn't even think about it through the eyes of a student like Bobby. If there were more diverse perspectives in the tech industry, they might have stopped this foolishness. But computer science education homogenizes, and we desperately need more diversity so that we can be better computer scientists. Changing this is the way I do active citizenship here at Tufts. I'm not the only one who works on this. Tufts actually has 3 professors who study the development of youth's computational thinking and their creativity. One is Michelle Wilkerson-Jurdy, who's sitting right up front, and the other is Marina Bears in our child development department. Having 3 professors who do this kind of work is a unique resource of Tufts. There's no other college that has so many faculty doing this kind of research. Right now, we all work together sort of separately, but we're trying to think about how we could actually build a program that would bring us together with students who are interested in working in these kinds of issues. Back to my work, I think about 3 kinds of research questions. One is trying to study how people learn computer science, especially young people. And then I try to understand how can we create new technologies, new tools, and new teaching approaches that broaden who participates in computing and that deepen learning by people who do participate. And finally, I try to investigate how can we reshape public education to provide greater opportunities to all youth to learn computer science. I want to talk about the research on learning first. And I'm going to tell you about a research project from my lab called Blocky Talkie. I want to warn you up front that the data you're going to see are very, very fresh. They're very new. I don't have any solid conclusions to give you. And so what you're going to see is a work in progress. So I apologize if it feels that way. Most work is that way around here. I think we as an academic community too often just show things when they're finished and not when we're struggling with them. I'd like you to think about all the various technologies that you use in your life. You might use an iPhone to text your children. You might use a Nest thermostat to be able to make the house warm before you get home. Maybe you have a Tesla and know that your Tesla phones home over the cellular network to Tesla headquarters so they can send safety adjustments over the network to your car. Maybe you are a gamer and play games like World of Warcraft with lots of other people online. Maybe you Snapchat or tweet or do Google searches. I bet all of us do Google searches. And maybe one day you're going to have robotic surgery, possibly with doctors who aren't even in the same country as you. All of these technologies are about new kinds of human interaction and habitation that are possible through computer networking. It doesn't make sense to Snapchat alone. You can't get very far into World of Warcraft without multiplayer gaming. And most youth are very passionate about these kinds of systems and the kinds of interaction with their friends and loved ones that they make possible. I think we should channel this passion into exciting youth about computer science. But right now, there are no tools or teaching approaches out there that teach youth to build these kinds of systems. My students and I want to make that possible. I also think that we can use that passion as an opportunity to study how youth learn about some very powerful and challenging ideas in computer science. Those ideas are parallelism, concurrency, and distributed computing. Parallelism is when a computer does more than one thing at a time. So 2 processes run in parallel is the metaphor. Concurrency is when we weave together those parallel processes to make them communicate with each other or do work that's interdependent. And distributed computing is when we do that over hundreds or even thousands of computers with the knowledge that sometimes individual computers are going to die and the systems need to be able to recover from that. These are really difficult challenges in computing. People make all kinds of buggy systems, and in fact, they're really terrible about reasoning about how concurrency works. One of the reasons for that is that there are bugs that arise in these systems that don't arise in classical computer programs that are about one process unfolding over time. In fact, any university you look at, the standard ways we teach computer science almost totally avoid these issues. And so it's predictable that people wouldn't know how to think about them very well. These bugs can have very dire consequences. Some of you probably lived through the Northeast blackout of 2003. That was a concurrency and distributed systems bug. Some of you may remember people who died because of the Thurac 25 medical device in the 80s. That was a concurrency bug. This affects us every day. And the truth is, we know almost nothing about how programmers reason about these kinds of systems. And what's interesting is if you walk up the street here at Tufts, you'll find people in the physics department, the biology department, and definitely in the education departments who do painstaking studies of how people think about things like Newtonian mechanics or population dynamics or how variables work in mathematics. That research on cognition has informed all kinds of new approaches to teaching and learning. But we don't have that sort of knowledge base in computer science. We need it. And that's what my students and I, as well as people like Michelle, are trying to do. So our goals in Blocky Talkie are to understand if building concurrent networked systems can both get new kids into computer science and then also help us to understand how to help people to do concurrency better. And so we ask questions like, what kinds of project genres, project types can get kids excited to learn? And then when they are working on those projects, how do they think and learn? And then finally, can we improve the ways that we've designed our tools or our curriculum to support learning? I want to give you 2 examples of what this can look like. So one is about computer music. And this is a project I'm doing in collaboration with Paul Lehrman, who's somewhere out there, and with Rebecca Feebrink at Goldsmiths in London. We hypothesize that music can be a powerful way to get people started in concurrency and computing, and that it's also a powerful opportunity for us to study how they think about it. Music's great because it's culturally relevant. Nearly every young person loves music, is excited about it, talks about it with their friends, complains to their mom about the music that mom's playing in the car. Everybody cares about this stuff. They have opinions about it. They have prior knowledge about it. Those are all things that we can build on to support their learning. Another nice thing about music is that there's tons of parallelism in it. Most music has chords. Well, a chord is 2 notes being played at the same time. Performers also have to manage concurrency, much like a distributed system. They need to strike 2 notes at the same time. And in many pieces, they won't sound good if they're plucked apart. When we have multiple performers working together, we call that a band or an orchestra. Well, those are 2 words for different models of synchronization. A band is distributed, it's peer-to-peer. Everybody looks at everybody else to stay in time. Whereas an orchestra revolves around a centralized timekeeper. Those actually relate very strongly to different models for synchronization in computer science. And so what we do is we've developed tools and a curriculum for kids to be able to build their own computer music instruments, physically build them, they're handheld devices that they can play. They program them, and then they work together in groups to perform with them. I'm going to show you 3 videos of what this can be like. The first is of me, my wife Sarah, and my research collaborator Rebecca doing a demo for some kids of a song that you probably have heard. Almost none of the kids had heard it. I felt very old at the time. So, Ghostbusters, yes? Okay. So the thing that was going on here is that we had these handheld input devices that we could use to start and stop different pieces of the melody, the bass line, bring in and out the drums. I didn't show you that part, but my wife actually moves her body back and forth to bring the drums in and out. And one of the things that's really neat is you can see eye contact and gestures between Rebecca and me, where we're actually improvising the performance. The order of the melodies doesn't actually sound exactly like what you hear in the movie. But we built the technology so that you can program it to synchronize for you as you're trying to improvise. Now, we're doing this work as sort of a proof of concept of the possibility that this can work. Actually, our peer reviewers at the National Science Foundation have rejected every proposal we've sent them for this. Here's what they tell us. They actually don't think it's possible for kids to do this, and we'd like to show them otherwise. So we actually recently conducted a pilot study, a proof of concept that shows that this actually is feasible. And I want to show you 2 videos of that from a Boston community center. The first one is of a young lady named Hermela, who built a musical instrument that could accompany her as she sang her favorite John Legend song. So it goes on for a few minutes, and it might sound very simple. It's a pretty simple melody going on there, but computation-wise, there's actually a decent amount of complexity there. Everything you heard was made of chords, and that's two processes that she had to synchronize to play different notes at the same time. Again, people say kids can't do this. They can. Now I want to show you another video of 3 kids who didn't manage to synchronize themselves as well as Hermela. Each one built something that sounded really good alone. But the thing you'll see is they don't sound so good together. But the other thing you'll see is that the students get frustrated. They're invested and they're emotional about the work that they're doing. Okay, so obviously that's not the most pleasing sound you've ever heard. But it's actually pretty cool. So Amin, the guy on the left, built an instrument that works sort of like a trumpet. You actually have to blow into a sensor and push buttons at the same time to make it make sound. Caress in the middle built one that you did some binary math, so you could actually make 7 different notes depending on key combinations of buttons that you pressed. And Frank actually wasn't too into music, and he made a bass line that's pretty simple. But the thing that's interesting here is twofold. One is this is an activity that brought 3 guys together to play music together. Another is that the out-of-syncness that you hear is actually an opportunity. It's an opportunity to have a hard academic idea, like synchronization and concurrency, be something you want to learn because you want to be able to perform better. It links the possibility of learning something hard and the desire to learn something hard to the desire to make good music. We want to create lots of moments like this, moments where things don't work quite how kids want them to and where they want to learn to fix them. The nice thing about music and our tools is that when there are conceptual needs, like learning about synchronization, they become really salient, they become really obvious. It's not always clear when you're learning math what you need to learn to do a problem or what you're not understanding. Here it becomes very clear, I need to learn to synchronize this stuff. And so we're really excited to understand how problems like this can motivate learning about synchronization and other concurrency topics. As I noted, we're just beginning data analysis, so I'm not going to give you any conclusions about it just yet. But I do want to tell you about another genre we're doing. And this is about kids being able to build simple networked inventions to address needs in their homes and in their communities. So I'm going to just play you a little video that one of my grad students, Joe Sanford, made. So what he loves this cat. I mean, he really loves this cat, and he misses it when he's in the lab. So he built a network device that lets him feed his cat when he's at work. So there's 2 pieces, one at home that detects when the cat's nearby. When it is, it sends a signal to his desk at work. If he wants, he can press a button then to cause the Lego cat feeder to spit out cat kibbles. So it's a pretty simple demo, but there's some really powerful ideas there. Right? To make something like this, kids would have to invent network protocols for multiple devices to communicate. It also anchors learning about those things in a kind of need that almost all kids have. They love their pets. They love animals. They want to take care of them. And this spring, we're going to be doing workshops with high school students where they'll invent their own networked pet care technologies. The Blocky-Talkie research that I just showed you will tell us about how youth can learn some important, powerful ideas in computer science. But it doesn't tell a whole story of how we're going to close gaps and who even gets to learn computer science. And I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing at Tufts on that front as well. Some of you may have heard of the Technovation Challenge. It's sponsored by Google and the Navy. And it's a program where middle school and high school girls do market research, and then they learn to design, build, program, and then actually market their own mobile apps. So middle school girls working on this spend 4 hours per week over 12 weeks, and adult women mentor the girls on skills ranging from computer science to developing business plans. Last year, about 100 girls from Massachusetts participated. There were 23 teams. I'm also really proud to say that 5 Tufts women were mentors for these girls. I'm actually not allowed to be a mentor because I'm a man, but they did let me run the design workshop for all the girls, which was pretty fun. It was really exciting to see the work they did, but when I looked at the final presentations by the girls, I was a little frustrated because there were no girls from Boston, Cambridge, Somerville, Medford, Malden, Quincy, or any urban area. We need to get projects like Technovation into urban schools. Obviously, that's going to take time, and the State Department of Education is working on it. But in the meantime, we at Tufts are working with the Massachusetts Technology Leadership Council to try to set up neighborhood hubs where girls from any school can come to participate and get mentoring. We're hoping that one's going to be in Boston and one's going to be in Malden. Another thing that we need to do is address the problem that there aren't enough teachers out there who actually know how to teach computer science. And this semester, I'm piloting a new class about different approaches to teaching computer science in K-12, with a big focus on equity issues. Students in this class in the education department read research on how youth can learn computer science, on new approaches to teaching all kids computer science, and then the students in the class do projects with a variety of technologies that are designed to attract different groups of kids to computer science. And we're having a total blast. So here's pictures of two projects. The two women on the left, maybe their parents are in the room, I don't know, made light-up plush toys that look like fish and that change the color of their lights depending on the brightness in the room. It's pretty cool. It's not an example of something that would necessarily challenge these undergraduates in computer science, but it's an example of a kind of activity that could get kids into computer science. On the right is another project. This was a sort of laser tag, but with flashlights project. They built a shirt that you wear, and when your friend hits you with a flashlight, the shirt vibrates to let you know they've got you. It's pretty cool. So earlier I talked about active citizenship, and I explained that it's not just about helping someone, and it's not just about improving your community, but it is about recognizing every person's right to take a role in shaping the world around them. I've shown you some ways in which computer science is a powerful tool set for changing the world, but that right now we're not allowing all people to participate. I've also shown you some ways at Tufts that we're working to change this. I've told you about how we're creating new technologies that enable all youth to get into computer science by tapping into their passions for music and taking care of pets. I've shown how we're studying how youth learn computer science when they do this work. I've talked about how we're creating new community partnerships and how we're creating innovative new courses to train teachers in computer science. You might be wondering, what can you do? Well, here are some suggestions. The first is to push your elected representatives. Chances are very good that the public schools near you don't offer computer science. You should demand that they do. Chances are that your state or district doesn't have standards for computer science education. You should demand that they do. Your state might not even consider computer science to be an academic subject. Usually it's classed in with auto repair, so kids don't get college credit for it. Write your senator, your representative, or your superintendent and demand that they change this. You can be a mentor. Whether you have business skills, design skills, computer science skills, it doesn't matter. There's lots of room in computing to apply those skills to helping young people to succeed. As I mentioned, there are far too few teachers who know and can teach computer science. Many schools can't offer computer science classes because there's nobody to teach them. Now, I love the course I'm teaching. It's the first one in the entire region. But our education courses are some of the most expensive for hundreds of miles. Our society needs to find ways to make going back to school to learn computer science teaching much more affordable to teachers. If you have any ideas about how to do this, I would love to hear them. And finally, and possibly the easiest, encourage your daughter or your son to take a computer science class. We love to teach here at Tufts, and we would love to have your sons and daughters in our classes. Thank you so very much.